There are only 3 species of mammals on Earth that feed exclusively on blood, no fruits, no insects, no plants, just blood, and all 3 live in the Americas. The common vampire bat, the hairy-legged vampire bat, and the white-winged vampire bat. They hunt at night, land on sleeping prey, make a surgical incision with razor-sharp teeth, and drink. For centuries, we feared them, built legends around them. Bram Stoker's Dracula immortalized them as symbols of parasitic evil, creatures that take without giving, that spread disease, that exist only to drain life from their victims. And for just as long, science agreed. Vampire bats were parasites, simple, opportunistic, driven by hunger and nothing more. They target livestock, occasionally bite humans, spread rabies. They're pests, dangerous, worth eradicating. That was the consensus for decades, published in textbooks, taught in universities, accepted as fact. Then, in 1983, a researcher named Gerald Wilkinson was observing a colony of common vampire bats in Costa Rica when he noticed something that shouldn't happen. A bat that had failed to feed that night, starving, weak, hours from death, was approached by another bat. And that second bat regurgitated blood directly into the starving bat's mouth. It wasn't a parent feeding offspring. These weren't relatives. They were unrelated adults. And one was giving up its own hard-won meal to save another. Wilkinson watched it happen again and again. Different individuals, different nights, a pattern. Vampire bats were sharing food with non-relatives, altruistically, which according to evolutionary biology shouldn't happen. Natural selection favors selfishness. You don't give away resources unless there's a genetic payoff, unless the recipient shares your DNA. But these bats didn't care about DNA. They cared about relationships. They remembered who had helped them in the past, and they returned the favor, sometimes years later. It was reciprocal altruism, tit-for-tat cooperation, the kind of sophisticated social behavior we associate with primates and dolphins. Not bats, certainly not vampire bats. And that was just the beginning, because over the next 40 years, every assumption we made about these creatures, their behavior, their biology, their impact on ecosystems, would be systematically dismantled. We thought they were disease vectors. Turns out, their saliva is revolutionizing medicine. We thought they were mindless parasites. Turns out, they're some of the most socially complex mammals on the planet. We thought they attacked humans regularly. Turns out human bites are accidents, and the bats prefer livestock for a very calculated reason. We were wrong about almost everything, and the truth is so much stranger than the legend. Let's start with the feeding, because that's where most of the misconceptions begin, and where the reality gets truly bizarre. The common vampire bat, Desmodus rotundus, is about 3 inches long, weighs less than 2 ounces. It has a wingspan of 7 to 8 inches, and it needs to consume roughly half its body weight in blood every single night to survive. Half its body weight, every night, without fail. If a vampire bat goes 2 nights without feeding, it dies. Starvation. The metabolism is so extreme, so finely tuned to processing blood, that missing meals is fatal. This creates an existential problem, because hunting is risky. Prey animals move, wake up, fight back. On any given night, roughly 30% of adult vampire bats fail to find food. 30% every night. Which means in a colony of 100 bats, 30 are starving, facing death, unless something intervenes. For decades, we assumed natural selection would weed out the unlucky ones. That's how evolution works. The successful survive. The unsuccessful die. Population regulates itself. We were wrong. What actually happens is this. When a bat returns to the roost after a successful hunt, its stomach distended with blood, it seeks out individuals who failed, and it shares. Not randomly, not with everyone. It shares with bats that have shared with it before. It's reciprocal, calculated, based on memory and relationship history. Wilkinson documented this in the 1980s, but the scientific community remained skeptical. Maybe it was kin selection. Maybe the bats were all related. Sharing with cousins makes evolutionary sense. So Wilkinson tested it. He marked bats, tracked lineages, analyzed DNA, and found that non-relatives were sharing food with each other at rates comparable to close family members. These bats were forming friendships, bonds based on reciprocity. I fed you when you were starving. You feed me when I'm starving. We both survive. It's a survival strategy built on trust, and it works. Vampire bat colonies have lower mortality rates than expected precisely because of this food-sharing behavior. But here's where it gets even more sophisticated. Because vampire bats don't just share with anyone who asks. They punish cheaters. In a 2013 study, researchers observed colonies where certain individuals would accept food when starving but refused to share when they had excess. Classic free riders, taking without giving, the other bats noticed, and stopped sharing with the cheaters permanently. Even if the cheaters started offering food later, the bats who had been exploited wouldn't accept. They held grudges, social ostracism, punishment for violating reciprocity norms in bats. This is the kind of behavior we see in human societies, in primate groups, not in creatures with brains the size of almonds. And the memory required for this is staggering. Vampire bats can live 12 to 15 years in the wild. They remember social interactions over years, possibly decades. They track who helped them, who exploited them, and adjust their behavior accordingly. This is an instinct. This is culture, social learning, the transmission of behavioral norms across individuals. But the social complexity doesn't stop at food sharing, because in 2019, researchers discovered something even more remarkable. Vampire bats adopt orphans. Not just any orphans, orphans they're not related to. When a mother dies, her pup is left helpless, unable to hunt, unable to fly well enough to survive. In most bat species, orphans die quickly. Adoption is rare. It doesn't make evolutionary sense to invest energy in raising another bat's offspring, but vampire bats do it regularly. Lactating females will nurse orphaned pups, feed them regurgitated blood, groom them, protect them for months until the pups are old enough to hunt independently. And genetic analysis confirms these aren't relatives. They're not sisters, not cousins, just bats from the same colony who formed social bonds with the mother and extend those bonds to her offspring. This is altruism, pure, unexplainable by simple kin selection theory. It costs the adoptive mother energy, resources, time, and she gets nothing in return except the survival of an unrelated pup. Why? We don't fully know. The leading hypothesis is that strong social bonds create obligations that extend beyond the individual. If you had a reciprocal relationship with the mother, you honor that relationship by caring for her offspring. It's a moral framework. In bats, and if you're sitting there thinking this completely contradicts everything you learned about vampire bats being mindless parasites, you're right. Make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next is even more disturbing. The thing vampire bats are most famous for, drinking blood, has led to a medical breakthrough so significant it saved tens of thousands of human lives. And we almost missed it because we were too focused on eradicating them. The bite. Let's talk about the bite, because this is where vampire bats go from remarkable to genuinely alien. When a vampire bat lands on a sleeping cow or horse, its preferred prey, it doesn't just sink fangs in and start sucking. That's movie nonsense. Here's what actually happens. The bat lands, uses heat sensors in its nose, specialized infrared receptors to locate blood vessels close to the skin. It's thermal imaging, built into the bat's face. Once it finds a good spot, it uses razor-sharp incisors to make a small cut, roughly 7 millimeters long. The teeth are so sharp and the cut so precise that the animal usually doesn't wake up. Then, and this is critical, the bat doesn't suck. It licks. The tongue has grooves running along its length that channel blood into the mouth via capillary action. It's a living straw. The bat laps blood for 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer, and the entire time the blood keeps flowing. Doesn't clot, doesn't scab over, because the bat's saliva contains anticoagulants. For centuries, we knew this, but we didn't understand how powerful those anticoagulants were until the 1990s when researchers isolated the specific compounds. One molecule, called Dracula, because scientists have a sense of humor, is the most potent natural anticoagulant ever discovered. It's more effective than anything in modern medicine at preventing blood clots, and blood clots kill strokes, heart attacks, pulmonary embolisms. Millions of people die every year because blood clots in the wrong place at the wrong time. In 2003, a drug called desmoteplase, derived from vampire bat saliva, entered clinical trials for treating ischemic strokes, strokes caused by blood clots blocking arteries in the brain. The results were remarkable. Desmoteplase could dissolve clots hours after a stroke began. Existing drugs had narrow time windows, minutes, maybe an hour. After that, the damage was done. But desmoteplase worked up to 9 hours post-stroke. It gave doctors time to get patients to hospitals, time to administer treatment, time that saved brain tissue, saved lives. As of 2024, drugs derived from vampire bat saliva have treated tens of thousands of stroke and heart attack patients. The pharmaceutical applications are worth billions. A creature we classified as a pest, a disease vector, something to exterminate, is saving human lives. Because evolution spent millions of years perfecting an anticoagulant we couldn't design in a laboratory. But the medical applications don't stop there. Because vampire bat saliva contains more than just anticoagulants. It has painkillers, natural analgesics that prevent prey from feeling the bite. Researchers are studying these compounds for developing non-addictive pain medications. It has vasodilators, chemicals that widen blood vessels, increasing blood flow to the wound, potential treatments for hypertension and cardiovascular disease. And it has antimicrobials, proteins that prevent infection. Because an open wound on livestock is a bacterial invitation, but vampire bat bites rarely get infected, the saliva actively inhibits bacterial growth. We're talking about a multi-drug pharmacy, produced naturally by a 3-inch bat, and we dismissed it as a nuisance. Now let's address the elephant in the room. The thing vampire bats are most infamous for: disease transmission. Specifically, rabies. Vampire bats can carry rabies. This is true, and they can transmit it to livestock and humans through bites. This is also true. In Latin America, vampire bat-transmitted rabies causes economic losses and occasional human deaths, so the standard response has been culling. Kill the bats. Reduce the population. Reduce the disease. Except this approach doesn't work, and in 2021, researchers figured out why. When you cull a vampire bat population, poison them, destroy roosts, reduce numbers, the colony structure collapses, the social bonds break, new bats move in from other areas, unrelated individuals, no established reciprocity, no social memory. And here's the critical part: in a stable colony with strong social bonds, rabies transmission is actually limited. Bats groom each other, remove parasites, monitor each other's health. Sick bats are often isolated or cared for in ways that reduce spread. But in a disrupted colony, these behaviors break down. Bats interact randomly. Disease spreads faster. Culling creates exactly the conditions that accelerate rabies transmission. It's counterintuitive, but the data is clear. Stable vampire bat colonies with strong social structures are better at controlling disease than disrupted, stressed populations. The solution isn't eradication, it's vaccination. In 2016, researchers developed an oral rabies vaccine that can be applied to bats. They capture a few individuals, vaccinate them, release them. The vaccinated bats groom other bats. The vaccine spreads through grooming contact. It's called herd immunity via social behavior, and it works. Rabies transmission drops without destroying colonies, without disrupting ecosystems. We spent decades trying to kill vampire bats when the answer was working with their social behavior, not against it. But here's the revelation that really captures how wrong we were. In 2020, researchers published a study on vampire bat hunting strategies, and it revealed something nobody predicted. Vampire bats don't just target any animal, they're selective, highly selective. They prefer cattle and horses, large domestic animals, not because they're easier to find, not because they have more blood, because they're predictable. Wild animals are dangerous. Unpredictable. A peccary wakes up mid-feed and you're dead. A deer bolts and you go hungry. Wild prey is risky. Domestic livestock, on the other hand, are habituated to human presence. They're calmer, less reactive. They sleep deeper, and they're concentrated. Ranches have dozens of animals in one location. From the bat's perspective, livestock are the safe, reliable option. They're not attacking farms because they're evil. They're choosing the prey that minimizes risk and maximizes success rate. It's calculated, strategic, risk-averse decision-making. And when you understand this, the human bite incidents make sense. Humans aren't preferred prey. We're mistakes. A bat lands on what it thinks is a sleeping cow in the dark, realizes it's human. Too late, already committed, takes a quick feed and leaves. We're accidents, not targets, but the public perception is backwards. We think vampire bats hunt humans, prefer human blood. Dracula mythology reinforced for generations. The truth? We're the least desirable prey. Too reactive, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They want cows. We just happen to sleep near cows sometimes. So where does this leave us? Now, what do we actually know about vampire bats now? We know they're not mindless parasites. They're socially complex mammals with memory, reciprocity, and cultural norms. We know they share food altruistically, adopt orphans, punish cheaters. We know their saliva has revolutionized stroke treatment and may revolutionize pain management. We know culling doesn't work, and vaccination does. We know they're not attacking us. We're collateral damage in their calculated survival strategy. But here's what we don't know. How sophisticated is their memory? Can they recognize individual humans? How much do they learn from each other beyond feeding strategies? What other medical compounds are hiding in their saliva? We don't know. Because we spent 2 centuries fearing them instead of studying them, building myths instead of understanding biology, and now we're racing to catch up. Because vampire bats are declining. Habitat loss, culling programs, climate change affecting prey distribution. Some populations have dropped by 30% in the last decade. If we lose them, we lose more than a species. We lose potential medicines we haven't discovered yet. We lose a model system for studying reciprocal altruism. We lose answers to questions about social evolution we haven't thought to ask. The vampire bat isn't Dracula. It's not a monster. It's a 3-inch mammal with a survival strategy so sophisticated we're still unraveling it 40 years after we first noticed the food sharing. We were wrong about the parasitism, about the disease, about the danger, about the intelligence, about almost everything. The only thing we got right? They drink blood. Everything else was mythology we convinced ourselves was science. And somewhere right now, in a cave in Central America, there's a vampire bat, just back from feeding, approaching a starving roost mate, regurgitating blood, saving a life. It doesn't know it's rewriting evolutionary biology. It doesn't know its saliva is in hospitals saving stroke victims. It doesn't know it spent centuries as the villain in our nightmares. It's just being a vampire bat, social, reciprocal, calculating, surviving through cooperation in a world that told us cooperation doesn't exist outside primates. We called it a monster. Turns out we were looking in a mirror. Sleep well.